Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. So let's get going here today. I feel like you guys are way back there, so I'm going to have to be loud because I hope that by the time we're done here that we could all be friends and that we all be able to communicate and feel free to ask questions or make a comment. And I know it'll take a little bit of time for us to feel that way. But I hope by the time we're done, because I believe that most people in their heart are good. And I believe that we desire good. And truth helps us with that unity more than anything. So, but I want to start here first of all, I want to ask you why did you come out today? I want to just understand a little bit. Anybody who's willing to tell me why you come out tonight?
No.
I want to know. Just anybody wants to give it a shot? Go ahead.
So the reason I came out tonight was I'm a new Idahoan. I fled my state of Washington. I saw it disintegrate. I saw our freedoms just vanish. And when I came here, I thought Idaho was very free and very inviting. And then when I saw the commercial that you did on YouTube, when it talked about what the governor actually did here, I realized I missed out on that part. I thought Idaho was making like a Ron DeSantis stand,
Right.
for freedom, but it turns out they weren't. And that's why I'm here.
So I have some good news, bad news, and I have some good news for you. And hopefully I can get to make that point here tonight because there is some really good news. But it's not that the governor didn't try to do the exact same thing as Governor Inslee. He did. But there's some really good news, and you are in the right place. And I believe that we're all in the right place. And hopefully I can hit on that. Thank you very much. Right here.
I'm tired of hearing about you from the media.
So you're tired of hearing about me from the media. Thank you. Thanks for coming to find out. Yeah, I Googled myself the other day and I was like, this guy's a jerk. Hey.
I believe that we should be hiring people based on whether they're good, wise, and honest. And by wise, I mean somebody who is knowledgeable and has understanding, particularly about the Constitution. And I want to verify that with you myself, in particular, because I don't hire anybody unless they fit that bill.
So I'm in a job interview right now. Very good. I agree with you 100% that if we would do this more, if we had your mentality more, we wouldn't be in the trouble we're in, because Idahoans have been quite complacent, and they believe, a majority of them believe that they can go down to the voting booth and put their name next to an R or next to a D, and then that's going to represent them. And so thank you for looking into it a little more.
It's time to regain constitutional conservative values, to lead Republican principles and not a top-down Rhino Party leadership, which is just taking Idaho voters for granted.
Okay.
Amen.
Thank you. All right. I have another question. So, actually, right off the bat, how many of you have heard me speak before? Okay, that means that about 80% of you here haven't. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you for the first time. I'm going to ask a question, and hopefully we can kind of go through this exercise. I feel it's very important that we go through this, and most of the town halls that I hold, which, by the way, we're well over 200 town halls since I started this campaign, so it's been a learning experience for me, and I've met so many wonderful, wonderful people. So the question is, what is liberty? What is liberty? I have to admit that I had not really contemplated what liberty was until I was sitting in federal jail in solitary confinement. I've been there for months and months and months. I knew I was an innocent man, but I was still there, away from my family, and not very far away, somewhere in those prisons where my father and my brothers and other people I knew that were being held away from their families as well. And I had to really contemplate what liberty was. The other day I was in Malad, and I took a picture of this memorial, and you can't quite see it. As it gets a little darker, you'll be able to see this little memorial. You'll see there's a star next to it, and it says, "Those who gave their lives for freedom." So we believe that freedom, we believe that liberty is worth sending our young men and young women off to defend, and they lose their lives. We believe that it's important. We take our hats off when we sing the national anthem, and we feel it in our heart. Well, what is it? Anybody want to give it a shot? Because I believe I have the right definition, and I want to share it with you. But I want to know what you think it is. What your thoughts of liberty is. Would you all agree that it's important?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got to that point. We all agree that it's important. So what is it? What is it? We believe it's so important that we'll send our daughters and our sons off to actually possibly lose their life in defending it. So what is it? Right here.
I like Michael Knowles' definition. It's not all inclusive, but it's basically the right to do what is virtuous.
The right to do what is virtuous. I would agree with that. The right to make your own choices and do what you want. Is that what you said? Okay, yeah. Live how you want. Thank you. I would agree with that too. Any others want to give it a shot? Right here and then right here.
Freedom under God's law.
Freedom under God's law. Okay, right here.
To be free from oppression under the thumb of another man.
To be free from oppression under the thumb of another man. I would agree with that. So, go ahead.
I heard you say that, but that's the right to do whatever we choose as long as it's not infringing on somebody.
Okay, thank you. Because I was just going to go. I believe that liberty, and when I say I believe, I'm going to back this up because I really want you to challenge this. Because I'm hoping that you will adopt this because it's right, not because it's just something that I believe. But I do believe that liberty is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. Exactly. To do whatever you want. Now, just to back it up, like I said I would, let's go to some pretty strong authority, like someone like Thomas Paine, right? He's got some pretty heavy weight behind him. He says, liberty is the power to do everything that does not interfere with the rights of others. Thus, the exercise of the natural rights of every individual has no limits, save those that assure to other members of society the enjoyment of the same right. So he's saying the same thing, right? The power to do everything that does not interfere with the rights of others. So it's a lot more eloquent, but it's the same definition. Now, how about Thomas Jefferson? He was the author of the Declaration of Independence and one of the greatest founders and writers, founding writers that we have. And this is his definition. Rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of the law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. So he's saying there that liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. Or in other words, liberty is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. And then what he does is he then prioritizes it. He says that the individual rights has more priority than the law. And that the law is there to protect the individual rights. But then he also says that many times the law is often but the tyrant's will. So he prioritizes that. He shows what is the most important part of liberty, and it is the individual's rights. And that the law is there to protect, or is supposed to protect the individual rights. So let's apply this definition. So can we at least somewhat accept this definition? Does anybody have like major objections to the definition that I applied to liberty, which is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights? Anybody have like some major objections? You might have some questions, and that's fine. But no, does anybody have any major objections? Okay, now I'm going to move forward because I think it's really, really important that we all somewhat at least get on the same page with this, because if you don't know what it is, then you don't know when it's gone, and you also don't know how to get it back, and you also don't know who's taking it, and also it can't mean the same thing to you if you really don't know what it is. And so we all have acknowledged, we feel it in our hearts, which we do, but now hopefully you can define it. And I'm going to again give you some more references here, but let's actually apply it into our lives. Let's apply it into our lives. So what about freedom to worship? So the definition of freedom to worship, according to Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson, and according to the definition I give, would be the ability to worship whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. So I can't force somebody to worship, right? Or I can't, worship somebody. I can't take and do a human sacrifice and say, well, that's the freedom of worship. That's not freedom of worship. But I should be able to worship whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want, as long as I do not infringe upon another person's rights. And our nation was built upon that idea. That's the very first amendment of the Bill of Rights, or the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights in our U.S. Constitution, is the protection of that right. What about the freedom to own and control property? So what would that be? To be able to do whatever you want with your property as long as you do not infringe upon your neighbor's rights. Right? So are we losing that freedom?
Yes.
We are, right? More and more heavier regulations, control of our own property is being layered on top of us year after year after year. And so with this exercise, you can see that the loss of freedom to own private property is when somebody else tries to control your property when you're not infringing upon another person's rights. And so you could now see who is taking that now it's being lost, right? And you can see who are the ones who are taking it. And so that's going to help you out when you vote. That's going to help you out when you see different regulations or ordinances or whatever it might be. You're going to be able to identify that this is not freedom. Because our founders truly believed that a person should own his property and should be able to do whatever they wanted with it as long as they did not infringe upon their neighbor's rights. That they had no right whatsoever to infringe upon their neighbor's rights, but they had whatever, they could do whatever they want as long as they're not doing that. So what about the right to, I like the freedom to trade. To trade with each other, right? To be able to trade with whatever you want, with whomever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. I like this because I'm an entrepreneur in heart, and I like to be able to trade with people that, that want to trade with me. But I can't force someone to buy something from me, right? That wouldn't be free. That wouldn't be freedom. Or someone can't force me to buy something. That wouldn't be freedom. Or I can't, say that they have to buy it at this amount. It has to be a willing buyer, willing seller. Both the buyer and the seller have to agree, and then it's free trade. Then it's freedom. And so, can you see also how this is also being lost? Our freedom to trade is being lost. We're restricted on what we can trade. We have to pay a third party whenever we trade. We have to do all of these things, and we truly are losing our freedoms on this. So now this is just a simple list you can now apply it to many, many things when it comes to your lives. But I do believe that freedom is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person. And just again, one more bit of evidence. Who was the author of the Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson, right? And I just read you his definition of what liberty is. And he says, in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So what was he talking about when he said liberty? The ability to do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. So it is built in our founding documents. The founding, thank you, Wendy. The founding, the oldest document we have in this country when it comes to our establishment. That liberty is in it, that it comes from God, that it is right that comes from God, and that it should be protected. Now, I usually like to go into, so anybody have any thoughts about that? Anybody want to, express any either concern or any, thoughts about that? Don't be afraid. We can all be friendly here, even if you don't agree. Does anybody, because I can promise you that when you go down to the county office or you go down to the city building, you're going to run into a whole bunch of people who do not believe and understand that this is the definition of liberty. They do not believe this. They believe that you are to obey man's law, whether you're infringing upon another person's rights or not. It has nothing to do with the ability to do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. And so I'm wanting to present to you this contrast and why and what is happening in our country to cause us to lose our liberty. It is happening. We are losing it. It's right, and it might be distressful to us or stressful to us or distraught, but to understand it is to define liberty, which is the ability to do whatever you want. So, Garth, go ahead.
Oh, I was talking with our Attorney General, Lawrence Wasden,
Ooh.
and he said, I've been thinking about what he said. He said, he was trying to justify the stay-at-home order and the emergency declaration that Brad Little made, and saying that the Ninth Amendment, since the federal government wasn't assigned with police power, that the police power is reserved to the states, and the police power is over health, safety, welfare, and morals. And so he says our legislature put it into our code that during the declared emergency, the martial law emergency, that now all police power belongs to the governor. So the part about that bothers me is the morals part, saying he has the power over morals. That's just what police power is. He says that definition comes from Black's Law Dictionary, but it's just a common accepted definition of police power. But I don't want Brad Little telling me what is right and wrong and telling me what I can and can't do because he thinks it's wrong. So I guess that's my issue with this whole moral thing. I don't know what other people think. To me, it's freedom of conscience. I do what I think is right as long as
let's build on that a little bit. I think you kind of hit something. So when does the government have jurisdiction over you, over your property, over really anything? When does the government have jurisdiction over your body, over your property? There is a time, but when is it? Anybody want to take a guess?
when you're
Go
incarcerated.
ahead, right here.
When you infringe on somebody's
That's exactly right. When you infringe on somebody else's rights. The government has no jurisdiction over your body, over your property, over your assets, over your bank accounts, nothing. And unless you infringe upon somebody else's rights. And then there's even very strict rules of how they can do that. And they're found in our constitutions. They're found in our laws. And so that is the only time government, constitutionally and morally, I believe, has jurisdiction over a person's body, over a person's property, over their assets, and so on and so forth, is when that person infringes upon somebody else's rights. So I don't know what world Wasden grew up in, but it would be fun to have a good conversation with him about that, because it's very clear that the founders clearly believed that the government had no right to intrude, to regulate, to control, to use force, unless somebody was infringing upon another person's rights. So, thank you. Now, I'm here doing a job interview. I'm wanting to present to you basically some things that will hopefully help you go down and vote for me. It's a very interesting job interview that I've been doing, because usually you're asking the questions, and at the end I hope to get a lot of questions, but I want to introduce myself a little bit. So I'm going to go through this, actually who I am, rather than what Google or MSN tells me I am. Tells you I am, yeah. So I grew up on the Bundy Ranch. That's in southern Nevada. It's a dry, arid place. I'm going to show you some pictures here. This is my parents. These are my parents, Cliven and Carol Bundy. And I'm grateful for good parents who taught me right from wrong, and taught me how I was supposed to treat people, and taught me when to compromise and when not to compromise. Here's a picture of the Bundy Ranch. You see there's not a lot of trees or green or anything that's really represents green. And it's a very, very arid place. Here's a steer on the hill. You can see some of the vegetation there. It takes 100 acres to produce enough feed for one animal, one cow. And so it's a hard living. And my family went into that area in 1877 after a group that was in there prior to them was only in there for 9 months. I believe it was around 9 months. And they said that the place was uninhabitable, that no one could live there. And my family went in there and began to divert the waters out of the Virgin River, began to capture the little springs on the hills and to make water troughs for their cattle. And now I'm the 5th generation. We've been there for almost 150 years. This is my little brother. We're hog tying a calf to get ready to brand him. This is my little sister getting off the bus. We used to ride the bus. Well, we rode the bus an hour to the school and an hour home. And we were the first to get on and the last to get off. And this is kind of interesting. My sister getting off, and she's met by 4 dogs and a calf. And that calf actually, his mother was hit on the highway. And so my dad did an emergency C-section and pulled that baby calf out. We started taking care of it. The mother died, and we bottle fed that calf, which was not completely, rare growing up on the ranch, but he became such a pet. He became a big nuisance, and he would try to get in the house, and he would just break through the fence. And he was always he always thought he was supposed to be with humans because we had raised him. And when he got to be a big bull, he would go out in the field not very far from the house, and the sheep and the dogs, they'd all pile in one big pile, and they would sleep. And we always just teased that they were having an identity crisis, like some of the people here in Boise. When I was about 15 years old, my father came to me and said that the ranch wasn't big enough for the both of us. And it wasn't because he's being mean or we were really fighting or anything, although we did have our knockdown dragouts. I've got 5 brothers and my dad, and we're all pretty hard-headed, so from time to time, but that wasn't what this was about. He was basically explaining to me that the ranch does not produce enough living for all of his children, and it only produced enough for a couple of families, and that I was going to have to probably leave the ranch and go find another way to make a living, which I didn't like that idea, but he wanted to make sure he kind of put that in my mind at a young age so that I would start thinking that way. And ultimately I did leave the ranch, but before I did, I went on a mission, an LDS mission to Minnesota, and I taught the gospel of Jesus Christ. I taught people about Jesus Christ. I did the best I could. And there was a lot of refining for me during that process because I came from the ranch, where we were miles out of town, spent a lot of time there. And although I went to school and had tons of good friends and played football, I was actually the student body president of my high school. But I needed a lot of refining, and I got that. But the most important thing that I received by going to Minnesota for 2 years and talking to as many people as I could about Jesus Christ was I left there committed to doing whatever I was going to do was going to be for the Lord. And I believe I haven't lost that. Like, my desire is to truly serve Him and to balance that. Everything that I'm doing, is it right? Is it what the Lord would want me to do? After that, I went to a little school, little university in Cedar City, Utah, and I started a little business, a fleet maintenance business that I thought was going to put me through school. I thought I was so smart. I was going to be an entrepreneur. I was going to make money, and then I was going to go to school. That was a terrible plan because my business took all my time, and I had to make a decision whether I was going to continue. And my degree was business management, and so I just decided to go into business. And so after some time, I ended up just doing my business. But I was there in Cedar City, and it really wasn't the best place for my type of business. Like, I needed big fleets, big trucks, and to take care of. And Cedar City wasn't the place, but I felt like I was supposed to stay there, like I was needing to be there for some reason. And finally, I figured that out because I was to meet my wife, and I finally met her, and we got married. I convinced her to marry me, and within just a few months, we moved down to Arizona, and I took my business down there, and we started a really good life down there. We had three boys, 3 girls, so 6 children altogether, and I built one of the largest fleet maintenance businesses in Arizona, private fleet maintenance businesses in Arizona, and I started that from scratch, and I've hired hundreds of people, and I've dealt with millions of dollars of budgets, and I had to create all the processes and procedures and get everybody moving the right direction, everything that it would take to build from scratch a business. And we provided services to many companies in that area for 21 years, and then I ended up selling that business. But before I sold that business, I also, when we were about 16 years into it, I could see that that industry was really lacking technology. It wasn't there. For whatever reason, maybe it was just hard for people to actually create technology in that industry. So I decided, well, if it's not there, then I'm going to build it. And so I put a team together, and we started building a software for the fleet maintenance shop management industry. And it took me several years, and my customers were guinea pigs, my technicians were guinea pigs, my office staff and my vendors were all working. They knew what I was doing, and they're all happy to work with me, and there was good communication there. And we ended up building this software and implementing it in my shop first and testing it and all that. And it worked so well that we started selling it to other shops across the country. And now it's one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. And I also have sold that business since. And I've become, like what I say, I've just become a full-time government agitator. No, that's not true. I actually have been doing a little more than that. So, but it has given me the time to be able to stand up for people, to be able to do some of the things I need to do. Since I've taken some of that money and I bought some commercial properties where I lease them out, and that pays the bills. And so, but why do I tell you this? Normally I wouldn't tell people this other than my family, but this is a job interview. I'm trying to show you that there's another side to me than just the Bundy Ranch. Although I'm very grateful that I have that side to me, because that roots me in freedom, and it taught me how to work hard, and it taught me that things were never easy. They were never easy. On the ranch, nothing is easy. And but then also I have a business side to me. I have an entrepreneur side. I have a side that loves to invent and loves to create and loves to organize people and loves to get people going in the same direction and having the same vision. And I believe that those skills that I have been able to develop by having these businesses for many, many years will become very useful in the governor's office. Now, with that being said, let's now focus on Arizona. Or shoot, not Arizona. That's where I came from. Let's focus on Idaho. Because we have some challenges, and I want to talk about them. And Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. And if you don't know that, then I hope what I'm about to show you here will give you a good understanding of what type of battle we're in. And one way or the other, I hope to either get you to see one way or the other. You may not agree with me. You may even disagree with me further than you ever did before, if you have disagreed with me. And most likely, my presentation will. But if you somewhat or don't know, I hope to be able to show you what is happening in Idaho. Because here are some facts. First of all, as you know, Idaho is the fastest growing state in the United States, and it's been that way for some time. In fact, since 2015, approximately 248,000 people have moved to Idaho. Now, think about this. That's about 20,000 more than Boise. And if you were to look at the challenge of this, think about adding the city the size of Boise to Idaho every 10 years. And that's what we're facing. That's a huge challenge just in itself. I'm not talking about the growth being necessarily the negative part, but I'm talking about it being a huge challenge. And so, and it looks like, again, by all projections, that it's going to continue to grow like this. Now, to make things worse or more challenging, approximately 36% of the people coming to Idaho are liberal-minded, and they want desperately to change Idaho and our conservative values into a more progressively woke place to live. And they are very, very active in doing this, and they've been very, very successful in other states. And they are here, and they believe that they are here to stay. And so that is a challenge. Now, we see, things like this. This is a chart because with the Republican Party controlling the House, the Senate, and the governor's office for the last almost 3 decades, you would think that Idaho would be the most conservative state in the United States, but it's not. Right? It would just make sense. You're like, well, the Republican platform is all about minimized government. It's about fiscal responsibility in government. It's all about protecting the unborn. It's about freedom and liberty, and it is literally espoused in the Republican Party platform, all of those things, yet we haven't seen it implemented in Idaho and in the Idaho laws, even though the Republican Party has been controlled the House and the Senate and the governor's office has been controlled by the Republican Party. Now, I say that not because I'm trying to be down on people that are in the Republican Party, but I say that because something is happening with the Republican Party that we need to be aware of. And I do think that we are being aware of it. We've seen some changes just recently, but why are we not the most conservative state in the United States? Why are we not putting forth the Republican platform? So I'm going to maybe give you some clues here. This individual right here, you might know him. Well, did you know that in the 2000s he was the only senator, so a state representative, to support gay marriage? You remember the whole gay marriage or marriage battle in the 2000s? Remember Proposition 8 in California? Well, during that time, he was the only state representative to support gay marriage. I'm talking about among the Democrats and the Republicans. If you remember, not even Bill and Hillary Clinton were like accepting gay marriage. It was just an unpopular thing to do, and Governor Little was the only one in Idaho to support it. Now, also under his leadership as governor, so just recently, Idaho has increased its food stamps program by 24.2%. That's higher than any other state in the United States. So there's that increase. He's also putting millions of dollars into free government housing. He just dumped another $50 million into government housing. And if you remember, you go back, remember when Medicaid expansion was presented here in Idaho, Obamacare? Well, Governor Little was one that got behind that, and he was supporting that. Also, Idaho, I'm going to go all the way back here. Under Governor Little's quote-unquote leadership, that's not the right graph. Right here it is. 39.7%, this is not my graph, this is the state's graph, 39.7% of Idaho's budget goes to welfare, goes to health and human services. So we can see that this is an issue. And why do I bring these up? Why do I need you or want you to know these things? Why are they important for me to share with you? Well, because let's think about this. State housing, government welfare, free food, free health care, free education, and pushing the gay ideology has been the staple of the leftist agenda for decades, right? If you were to listen, it's free housing, free food, free health care, free education, pushing the gay agenda, the gay ideology. That is the left's agenda. And nobody has pushed that agenda more in Idaho than Governor Brad Little. And so it's no wonder Idaho is in a fatal battle for its conservative soul, because he's not acting alone. He's got a whole bunch of buddies, what they call the Idaho Good Old Boys, and they've infiltrated into the Republican Party and have no intention whatsoever of putting forth the Republican platform. None. They just know that if they can be declared as an R, as a Republican, that the majority of the people of Idaho will go down and put a check next to their name no matter what they do. And that is what is causing us to lose the battle for our conservative soul here in Idaho. Now, some things have happened in the last few years to wake some people up. And I'm hoping that enough people are awake that we can change this. That's what I've been doing. That's why I'm here. Other than doing the job interview. So, now, if this was all I had to tell you, I could probably be at a little more ease and we can discuss this, but it's not. It's not all, because not only is Idaho the fastest growing state with the largest increase in food or in welfare programs, but Idaho under Brad Little is first in a few more things. Idaho was the first state to arrest people for attending church. Did you know that? In Moscow, Idaho. Always Watch the officers strip the Bible out of a pastor's hand so they put handcuffs on him in Idaho. Now, I can't watch this without it really bothering me. I hope it really bothers you too. Because I would have never thought that in Idaho that we would be the first state to arrest pastors, 3 pastors, for holding a church service outside without masks. And in fact, if we go to the Constitution of the United States, and let's go to the First Amendment. If you remember, the states would not ratify the Constitution unless they added the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments. It was so important to them that they had the Bill of Rights in the Constitution that they wouldn't even sign it. Most of them wouldn't ratify it until they were put in there. And the very first line of the very first amendment says this: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So it was that important to them that they put it in the first line of the First Amendment, which is the first Bill of Rights. And it says there that it's off limits. Like, the government has no right to infringe upon somebody else's liberty. Now, or religious liberty. Now, if there's any question, let's go to the state constitution, Idaho State Constitution, okay? Just so if there's any question, I'm like a guy doing card tricks, right? Pulling stuff. So, let's go to the Article 1, Section 4 in the Idaho State Constitution. It's titled Guarantee of Religious Liberties. It says, the exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed, and no person shall be denied any civil or political right, privilege, or capacity on account of his religious opinions. So again, it's very clear that, the right to worship is off. The government has no right to regulate, control, or infringe upon a person's rights to worship. Now, if there was just any question, which I don't believe there is after that, but if there was, then let's go to Section 19 of the Idaho State Constitution. And it's titled Religious Freedoms Guaranteed. And I believe that this is really beautiful writing. It says, it is ordained by the state of Idaho that perfect toleration of religious sentiment shall be secured, and no inhabitant of said state, that would be Idaho, shall ever be molested in person or property on account of his or her mode of religious worship. And yet, what is happening right here? The very opposite of that. The very opposite of that. And yet, these officers, they were required to take an oath to both of these. They were required to take an oath. To an oath where they promised to uphold and defend this Constitution against foreign and domestic enemies. And yet somehow, some way, in their mind, or maybe they just didn't think about it, or maybe they didn't contemplate it, or maybe they didn't take their oath serious, but somehow they're in direct violation of the oath that they took to this Constitution, to these constitutions. Why are they required to take an oath to these constitutions? Anybody have any idea? Go ahead.
Constitution, the West Constitution requires it.
Okay. Yes, and so does the state. You're right. It requires it. Okay. So is it just a box that they check off? You're required to take an oath. It's supposed to. The requirement is supposed to mean something, right? It's supposed. So what does it mean? Why did they require it right here and then right here? Go ahead.
The Constitution protects our liberty, and they are only here to enforce if liberties are infringed. So they need to know it.
Yeah, so they need to know that. So it does. It basically what it does is it limits government. That's what this does. It says that this is your authority, and so they took an oath to say, hey, we understand that this is our authority, and we're not supposed to go beyond it. In fact, we're supposed to defend against going beyond it. There was a hand over here.
They're public servants.
What's that?
They're public servants. They work for us.
Okay, they're public servants, yeah.
Make sure our rights
Okay, yep.
To hold them accountable.
Yeah, okay, to hold them accountable. Absolutely. Those are all correct. How about this too? What about so that they can say no to their superior? Right? So they say, no, I took an oath. I am not going to arrest pastors for having church. No. And I'm protected. I took an oath. How about we have a governor or a system within the government where we protect officers that say no? Right? Wouldn't that be good? I think that's very important. I think that's something that I'll do. I know that's something I'll do. In fact, I've made an oath to the officers of the state of Idaho that is what I'll do. That if they say no or they're upholding their oath of office and for some reason they're being reprimanded or their job is being threatened, that the state, the office of the governor, will come to their defense. So, but it's so important that these officers understand this. Now, I'm not giving the officers any type of break, but I do want to answer the question of why, and I'm going to. Why somehow in their mind they justified this. But just remember, Idaho was the first state to arrest pastors for having church outside. First state. Idaho was also the first state to arrest a mother for taking her children to the park. Meridian, Idaho, not very far away from here. And Idaho was one of the first states to raid businesses and begin prosecuting them for not locking down during the lockdown, COVID lockdown. Now, again, I asked the question, why are police in Idaho acting this way? They shouldn't be. Well, let's go to the health order. Order from Governor Little. Well, let's read it. It says, this order directs all individuals living in the state of Idaho to self-isolate at their place of residence. And there's some things it says there, and then go down to 3. It talks about essential, non-essential businesses. Then 4, it says prohibiting all non-essential gatherings of any numbers of individuals. Well, evidently, that meant church too. But the problem is that's off limits. They don't have the authority to stop that. And so we have this order that's telling people that they can't do things that are well within their rights, and that the government has no jurisdiction of restricting or prohibiting. And if we go to the 9th page of this order, section 9, the 9th page, it says, the director requests that the sheriffs and chiefs of police in the state of Idaho and the Idaho State Police ensure compliance with and enforce this order. So this was not an order of suggestion. This was an order of enforcement. And he actually directed the sheriffs, the chief of police, and Idaho State Police to ensure compliance with and enforce this order. And then it says, the violation of any provision of this order constitutes an imminent threat to public health. This was not an order of suggestion. So why were the police in Idaho acting this way? Because they were ordered to. They were ordered to by our governor. And I don't believe they're justified in it, because they took an oath and they should have said no. And many of them did. Many of them did. In fact, I had a really strange experience. I don't know if you remember in Caldwell, when I went to my boys' football game, and they wouldn't let me in without a mask. So I said, okay, that's fine. I'll go literally around the back area and just watch it over the fence. I didn't agree with it. And they could not stand that I was there. So they sent all their administrators and everybody saying that I have to leave, and they made a big old deal, and they called the Caldwell police. Well, Caldwell police came out, and guess what they said? We're not arresting him. He's doing nothing wrong. And it made them so mad. It made them so upset. And in fact, they were so upset that the Caldwell police actually felt like they needed to protect me. And they protected me while I sat there and watched the game, and then kind of somewhat escorted me to my car. And I had my mother and father-in-law with me and two of my kids. It was a really strange experience. And I don't know what you heard about the media, but that's the truth of what happened. The Caldwell Police Department would not arrest me because I had not violated anybody's rights. I wasn't breaking, whatever rule they believed, and I believe that they upheld their oath. And so it doesn't happen. But we also saw where hundreds of people were arrested, and businesses were raided, and people were prosecuted, and mothers were arrested, and pastors were arrested in Idaho. And so you can see the contrast. And they did it because he ordered them to. Now, let's just say, let's try to give Governor Little a little bit of slack, okay?
Didn't Little take the same oath that the police officers took?
Absolutely. He would have taken that exact same oath. Absolutely. And so would have all the other officers in government. So, but I know that there was some objections there about giving him some slack, but let's just go through this exercise, because let's try to answer the question of why he did what he did. And let's just say he was doing it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. Let's just say that, okay? And maybe you do believe that. There are a lot of people that actually believe that he was in a bad situation, and he just had to do it for the greater good, for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. That's what they believe. Well, I want to present to you some evidence to answer that question, whether he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. Now, before I do that, what's the opposite of evidence? Propaganda. Hey, he's the first one that actually got it completely right at the first time. That's correct. The opposite of evidence is propaganda. So I want you to decide whether what I'm presenting to you is evidence or propaganda. Okay? And you get to decide that. That's a gift that God gave you to make that decision. But you get to decide, because it's either truth, so it's evidence, or it's not truth, so it's propaganda. So, do you remember when Governor Little put the state of Idaho in a state of emergency status? Remember that? You kind of remember those days of 2020? Well, he did it on March 13th, 2020. And that was the day, and remember that day because that's important too as we go through this. Because on March 13th, 2020 was the same day that President Trump held a press conference and announced that he was releasing $50 billion to states that were in a state of emergency status, that were a state of emergency. So the very same day. Now, maybe Idaho was in a state of emergency. Maybe there was mayhem, people were, dying of COVID, this and that. The problem with that, on March 13th, on Governor Little's own website, on March 13th, 2020, he says there was only one confirmed COVID case. But yet he put the entire state of Idaho in a state of emergency, and it happened to be the same day that President Trump announced that if the state was in a state of emergency, that they could qualify for $50 billion of federal money. Okay, so there's a little bit of either evidence or propaganda, right? So now, let's go to March 25th, because you remember on March 25th, that was the day that the health order came out. And he put the state under what they called extreme state of emergency. Remember that? That was when we didn't know whether we can actually go into our backyards without the police arresting us, or if we could step out in our front yards, or this is when we see them arresting people in Moscow for going to church, and mothers for taking their kids to the park, and all of this garbage was going on, right? And we're all wondering, like, where do our rights begin and where do they end, and all of that, right? In fact, to be honest with you, I believe that he put the people of Idaho in terror. Now, but remember March 25th, because that was the day he put us in the state of Idaho in extreme state of emergency. So he upped it up. Well, it just so happened to be on March 25th was the same day that President Trump and Nancy Pelosi announced that a $2 trillion federal stimulus package was available for states that were in extreme state of emergency. Okay, you see a pattern here? And we had no COVID deaths, and 136 unconfirmed coronavirus cases. If you remember, they didn't know anything about it and all of that. So again, a little more evidence there of whether he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. Now, I think some of the best evidence, though, is found in his own documents, his own proclamations, his own orders. Here's one. He talks about securing millions of dollars in funds. He talks about the COVID emergency order. He talks about President Trump. And then right here, remember this section 46601. Just put that in the back of your mind, 46601. We're going to go back to that. This is the authority that he says he's acting under, right? He's saying that he's getting authority to do what he's doing under section 46601. We're going to go back to that. Right here is a letter he wrote to President Trump, thanking him for this money, thanking him that they received 1.25 billion and they're looking for more. Talking about the finances of the state. Then this is a really telling one. This is Executive Order number 2020-07. So I believe this would have been the 7th order in the year 2020. Okay. Well, it says here that it's a proclamation. He says, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 13, 2020, declaring a state of emergency in the state of Idaho, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 25, 2020, declaring a state of extreme emergency in the state of Idaho, whereas Congress passed and President Trump has signed 3 legislative packages that provide state funding in response to COVID-19, and then whereas I anticipate additional congressional actions on federal relief packages to states regarding COVID-19. So he's telling us what he's doing here, right? And then he says, now therefore, I, Brad Little, Governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby order the creation of a COVID-19 Financial Advisory Committee comprised of members appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor. So what did he do there? So he's saying, we're getting all this money, and we're getting more money's coming. We anticipate more. We've already received this. And so I'm going to put a committee together. And that committee is appointed by me, and they serve at my pleasure. Right? And we together are going to decide where these funds go. And this is my committee, this is my buddies. I'm going to get them together, and we're going to create a little committee, and we're going to decide where this money goes. And he says, for the coronavirus relief funds and other funds to be administered by the office of the governor. Okay, so he's getting all this money from the federal government. He created a little committee of him and his buddies that serve at his pleasure, that he appointed, and they are going to administer the funds out of the office of the governor. Now, how are the funds of the state supposed to be administered? Who's supposed to administer them?
The legislature.
The legislature, right? Absolutely. Why is it the legislature? Why is the legislature supposed to do it?
Because they represent the people.
Yeah, they are our representatives, right?
Mm-hmm.
We elect them in different districts, and we send them up there. And then there's 105 of them, and they all have to agree upon it. So they battle and they argue, and it's all out in the open, and eventually they all decide, or at least they vote where the money goes, and the majority decides, and it's all out in the open. Why is that such an important process that we go through that with our money, with the state funds? Yeah, to make sure that a small group of people don't get control of it and decide where it's spent, decide they're going to line each other's pockets, use it to keep themselves in power. They do it in the dark. You don't really know how it was spent, where it was spent. Our Constitution made sure that it didn't happen that way, right? Made sure it was very much in the open. But yet, what did Governor Little do? What did he do? He created a little group of his buddies, literally just a handful of his buddies, and they decide where this money goes. Now, anybody have any idea how much money we're talking about? Because maybe it's just a few $1 million, and to the state that's nothing. And anybody have any idea?
It's 125 billion, isn't it?
Okay, no, it's not that much. It's 18.7 billion that we know of for sure. 18.7 billion. Now that's 2 times the annual state budget. Just to give you a little bit of perspective. 2 times the annual state budget. So, and they took it from the federal government to their own little committee, and them themselves decide where the money goes. Now, ponder about that a little bit. Think about that. Think about how contrary that is to what we believe government should be doing. Now, to add on that, remember I said to put in the back of your mind section 46601? Well, I'm going to show it to you. 46601, Idaho Statute 46, Title 46, Military and Militia and Military Affairs, Chapter 6, Martial Law and Active Duty, 46601, Authority of the Governor. So what laws did he implement upon the people of Idaho? What's that? Martial law. So it's not a hyperbole. I'm not trying to excite you. He actually implemented martial law upon the people of Idaho. And he did it for 740 days, 740 plus days. He held that power. He wasn't supposed to. But let's look down here in section 2. It says, this is the power that he took to himself because he himself declared an extreme state of emergency. He says, during a period of state of extreme emergency, which, again, he created himself. I just showed you the evidence that there was no emergency. He created this himself, him and his buddies. So during a period of state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise all police power vested in the state. So what did he do there? Let me read it again. The governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise all police power vested in the state. What type of government do we call that?
Dictatorship.
That's right. That's a dictatorship. And he took those powers unto himself, and he took all this money that was coming, and he built a little committee so that they can control it. And now they have all the powers in the state government all under one body, and they have all the money they want to do with it, also to fund it. And they held that power over the people of Idaho for over 700 days. Yes.
This was a template of federal government in all states.
Yes.
States did not take the money.
Okay, that's a very good observation, because we talked earlier about Governor Inslee. Because what we noticed that when Governor Inslee would do something, then all these western states and other states would follow. It was really strange, and Governor Little was no exception. And what they did in each state was very similar, very close, and it was just the truly conservative governors that actually didn't participate in this, and Governor Little was not one of them. So, but you can see how dangerous this is to the people, because this is not representative government. This is not a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It is just opposite. It is one man controlling all government, and he has all the funds, and he completely took this power into himself for over 700 days. Now, remember, I'm trying to answer the question of whether he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. Well, let me give you a little bit more evidence, and then I'll jump off this. He says in his own press release on March 8, 2022, this is what he says in his own statement when he's talking about the emergency declarations. He says this: the emergency declaration served as an administrative function to recoup FEMA dollars for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. I thought he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho, and at least that's what he was claiming, right? But now he's clearly opening up and saying that the emergency declaration was just a way to get federal dollars for a variety of the projects that he wanted to do throughout Idaho, for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. Then he says the emergency declaration, without the emergency declaration, we would not be able to provide historic tax relief, a step that's even more important now as gas prices and inflation soar. Without the emergency declaration, Idaho would not be the state with the strongest economy in the nation. So again, that's really an insult to the people of Idaho.
Yeah.
He's not saying that we have this great economy because we're all out there working and producing. We got businesses and we're doing good. He's saying that the reason why we have this great economy and this surplus, and the reason I can give you a tax rebate back, is because we took so much money from the federal government. And that's the reality. And then this is so ironic because he talks about how important this was because now as gas prices and inflation soar. Well, what caused the inflation to soar? It was the states taking billions of dollars from the federal government. And so the very thing that he is saying it's a good thing I did is the very reason why it caused the inflation. The very thing that caused inflation. It says without the emergency declaration, the state of Idaho would not be able to provide Idahoans with historic tax relief. So let's look at that. Anybody receive this letter? It's from Brad Little. It would have come with a check. Or it would have been deposited into your bank account, and then this would have been in an email. And it was magically happened right before the Republican primary. And he says the economy of Idaho continues to blow past projections, and we are leading the country in economic prosperity. We achieved historic tax relief for Idahoans for the second year in a row. We're returning your tax dollars with our record budget surplus. And so I explained to you where that money came from, right? And how he can claim that. But let's go back to the second sentence where he says, we achieved historic tax relief for Idahoans for a second year in a row. What 2 years is he talking about? So it's dated 2022. This was early 2022. So he's talking about 2020 and 2021. So he's saying during the dark months of the pandemic, when Idaho was shut down, no one was going to work, businesses were shut down, you didn't go to school, and people were afraid of everything. Somehow he amassed a surplus. Somehow Idaho had the 2 best years they've ever had. I mean, that's like a business, shutting down its operations, continuing to keep paying its employees, all its expenses, its buildings, its vendors and suppliers and all of that, and never making one sale or making hardly any sales. And then at the end of the year, it has a financial report that says they had the best financial year they've ever had. That's exactly. In fact, if you look here at the Hill, it says the impact of the pandemic on the U.S. and global economy was catastrophic. Economic historian Adam Tooze characterized its impact as being the swiftest and most comprehensive contraction of global economic activity ever. And yet, Brad Little is saying, we had the 2 best years we've ever had. And there's a surplus, and there's so much of a surplus, we're going to give you a little bit of the money back right before the primary election. And guess what he's getting ready to do now, right before the general election? To send you another letter and give you another check right before the general elections. So, have we answered the question whether he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho or not? I think he answers the question. He says the emergency declaration served as an administrative function to recoup FEMA dollars for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. He says it himself. Yes. You're very observant, because I'm going to go there. Okay, so he saw more in that, because after all of this, right? After pastors were arrested, mothers were arrested, businesses were shut down, thousands of businesses never to reopen their doors, hundreds of people were arrested for going to public meetings without masks. They were arrested and prosecuted.
Mental health breakdowns.
What's that? People had, mental breakdowns. I mean, there was suicide rates spiked, all of these things, right? And we found out that he didn't do it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. He did it so he can get federal dollars. And then after all of that, he says this in his own press release. I kept Idaho open. Banned vaccine passports. Never issued mandates for vaccines or masks. He says, the emergency declaration never violated or restricted any rights of Idahoans. Never put Idaho on lockdown. never allowed for mandates for masks or vaccines. I mean, I don't know what world he lives in, but you and I had to live in the real world. I was arrested 8 times just simply for peacefully standing where they said I couldn't stand. And so that's the reality. That's the reality. But he actually says not only did they never violate anybody's rights, but he said they didn't even restrict any rights of Idahoans. And so I don't know why we have this going on then, Governor Little. I don't know why we have, Sarah Brady. She's still fighting her case today. She has not been given a trial. Over 2 years have gone by. I talked to her just a few weeks ago, and she says that her legal fees are over $26,000. Imagine what that family's gone through. They've had to move. Their world has been turned upside down. Her husband is a Boise police detective. And so, I mean, their world has been completely changed. What about this? I mean, businesses were actually raided and shut down, and the owners were prosecuted for not shutting down during the COVID. What about this? I mean, this is that order again, where he requests that the sheriffs and chiefs of police in the state of Idaho and Idaho State Police ensure compliance with and enforce this order. So I could go into a whole bunch more things, especially when it comes to Inslee and what Governor Inslee of Washington was doing and what Brad Little was doing in coordination with Governor Brown and Governor Newsom, and how they tried to do the very same things in very similar ways, and they would follow each other. Now, the good news that I promised that I would tell you is that there was a complete black and white difference from Washington and Oregon than coming to Idaho. Most of Idaho, people didn't really wear masks, and once they got past the initial push of the Idaho State Police and the different things that were going on, it kind of felt like a little bit like normal, somewhat. And so the good news is, well, let me ask the question, why? It wasn't because Governor Little didn't try to do the same things as Governor Inslee and Governor Brown, but why was it so much different here in Idaho? That's right, because the people would not comply. That's the difference. That's the only difference. It wasn't that the government didn't try. The people wouldn't comply, and finally the government said, there is no way the people are going to swallow this. No way Idahoans are going to take this, right? And so that is why you're in the good place. That's why you're in the right place. Yeah, hallelujah. But just so you know, yes, it's not because they didn't try. It's because the people wouldn't accept it. And in fact, we find and know that is actually how liberty is preserved and maintained. It is when the people stand up and say no. And a good example of that, and then I want to answer, so start thinking about questions that you might have, thoughts and comments, because I'm going to spend the rest of the time with you answering your questions. But just a good example of what I'm saying. The Declaration of Independence was written, 1776, right? We declared independence. And then I think it was 11 years later is when we had drafted the Constitution. Well, the Declaration of Independence is very clear that all men are created equal and that they're endowed with unalienable rights, endowed by our Creator. And that among these are life, liberty, and property. So we declared that all people were equal, yet there was a certain demographic of the population that wasn't treated equal. Right? They weren't being treated equal. They were being treated as slaves. And in fact, they even made a compromise in the Constitution where they didn't even count for a full representation in government. Right? So we have the Declaration of Independence that says that all rights are created equal. Our government and founding beliefs were based upon that. Yet the Constitution made a compromise. Right? So then we go all the way to now 100 years forward. and we're now looking at the 1860s. Well, what happened in the 1860s? There was a civil war. And what were we trying to do? We were battling over the same question of whether all men were created equal or not, right? There was the more U.S. men died in that war than any other war still today. So it was a terrible, terrible, bloody battle within and affected every family in the United States. And ultimately, that brought forth the 14th Amendment, which says that all people legally should be treated equal. That's what it says. I'm paraphrasing, right? But then let's fast forward to another 100 years. What's happening in the 1960s? What's happening in the 1960s? The Civil Rights Movement. Wait a minute, I thought we already answered this question 100 years ago. And I thought our founding documents already said it 100 years ago. So why are these people still not being treated equal? Why are they not able to go in the bathrooms, public bathrooms, drink in the public drinking fountains, go into the restaurants, go to the public schools? Why are these things being restricted from them if both our founding documents and our courts and the legal process all were saying that we should treat each other equally? Why are we still having this trouble? And the answer is because those people, the black community, had not stood up themselves. And it wasn't until they stood up themselves that they finally were able to correct it. They finally said, no, I'm going to sit on the front of the bus. I don't care if you arrest me. I don't care what you do. I'm going to sit on the front of the bus because you are going to treat me equal. I'm going to drink in the public drinking fountain. I'm going to go in the public bathrooms. You're going to treat me equal. And it wasn't until they did this that finally everybody got behind it and they actually started being treated as equals. And so my point is the law many times gets it wrong, right? Our documents might actually clearly state that we are not to be treated in certain ways, but it is not until the people actually do it that freedom is maintained, that freedom is secured. And we have some really good examples of that. So now with that, I want to answer your question. And I'll answer anything you want, as long as you wrote it down at the desk and Wendy's gone through it. I'm just kidding. So, anything. Go ahead. What states didn't take government money? I know that there was some, but I don't know which ones. So there was a few, very few. Okay, right here, and then right over here. You two. Go ahead. Yep, right back here.
I'm curious to know. I've been talking with others, committeemen and so forth. They're on the governor's ticket. There's a Democrat, there's a Republican, and there's you. And there is concern that because of a split vote between yourself and Little, it would respond to a Democrat. Address that.
Yeah, great question. So there's 3 primary candidates on the ticket: Governor Little, myself, and the Democrat nominee. And the question was with having 3, am I going to split the ticket and the Democrat will get it? And so I'll answer this with the factual numbers. So we have 136,000 Democrats, registered Democrats in Idaho. 136,000. There's about 1 million voters, just shy of 1 million voters. But then a lot of the liberals hang out in the unaffiliated category as well. So there's probably another, well, we don't know exactly, but there's probably another 100,000 or so in the unaffiliated, because there's a little over 300,000 unaffiliated voters in Idaho. And so just in order for this race, because of the amount of voters and those who most likely will come out to vote, which is a larger number than we've seen in the past, we've got to get to about 300 to 310,000 people. Whoever gets to the 320,000 mark will win the election. So you can see that it's going to be very, very difficult, almost statistically impossible for the Democrats to win this election, even if all of them got behind and all of them put it in and did what they hoped to do. And so it's just going to be very statistically almost impossible for the Democrats to win this election. And then on top of that, he's not even he's not even running a campaign. I mean, I haven't seen one sign. I haven't heard one thing from him. And the Democrats also didn't get the guy they wanted, because the guy they wanted was the Sandpoint mayor in northern Idaho. He was the mayor of Sandpoint. He's a flaming liberal, and they wanted him, and they didn't get him because he didn't fill out the paperwork right. And so, no, I'm not joking. He did not fill out the paperwork right. And I heard he was going to be a write-in, which would actually be good because he would split the vote either. So anyway, hopefully that answered your question. I mean, obviously that would be a major concern, but it's just statistically very, very, very difficult for them to do that. But I will say this, the establishment, the Brad Little and the Scott Bedkes and the Idaho establishment want you to believe that. Want you to believe that somehow going to split a vote. Okay, hold on, because there was right on YouTube, right here, and then go right here, and then right here, and then I got you back there. Okay. So on this side and then this side.
Okay. In 2020, our vote was stolen, and then we saw what they did in the media with the J6 and there's a lot of people in jail still today.
Yes.
And the media is a major part of why that occurred. Now, in Idaho, we have outside corporate interests, and we have deep state working, and also activists working to change the machine here in Idaho. It's kind of a big question, but how are we going to get past the media, since that most of our media is leftist, globalist, socialist, all that kind of stuff, that are lying to the American people, especially the ones that are sitting at home that don't know what's going on. How do we get past the media, and then how do we get past the people who are wrecking our system, like they did in J6?
Yeah, that's a big question. But so just so you know, I talked to the Secretary of State, and he says everything's okay, that no one stole an election, that we're okay. So I mean, just put your mind at ease, right? No. So a fact is that, like, for example, the Idaho Statesman is owned by the same people that run the liberal rag in Washington. So you don't have to go very far where you see what their agenda is. And they have come into Idaho. They see it as this conservative stronghold, and they are committed to breaking us up. And there's this unholy alliance between them and the establishment, the rhinos, and so anyway, it's a really interesting thing, but it really comes down to what agenda are they pushing, and they're pushing a leftist agenda. So how do we get over it? Well, one is we can't overestimate their influence, because I'm going to ask the question: who here is subscribed to the Idaho Statesman? Okay, now wait a minute. This is the heart of Boise, and no one in here? So I have asked this question all over Idaho for the last year and a half, and you know how many people have raised their hand? One person, and he says, well, I just want to keep an eye on the enemy. So the 13 and a half people that actually do subscribe to the Idaho Statements are never going to vote for me anyway. So let's not overemphasize their influence, but also let's not be naive too, because there is a major problem. How do we get what we're faced with as a campaign is that we can't get the message out because, well, I mean, we are getting it out, but it's extremely difficult because YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all of that censor us and constantly restricting us. So it really, when it comes to the campaign and this message and sending this message out, it really comes down to paid ads. We have to pay to push it out. And we're doing that, and we're concentrating that on that right now. But it's very, very, we're also needing your help to do that, your contributions. But also, I don't know how many people is here, but imagine if each one of you go out and talk to 10 people and spread that message. And we've had hundreds of town halls we've talked to tens of thousands of people. And if they'll go out and spread that message. Now, so that's another way to beat it. Now, you asked a second question, but I'm going to have to, how did you phrase it? It was a loaded question, by the way. But
it was. So we have the media that's in the way. We also have activists and outside corporate interests and the deep state that are trying to change the narrative in our state. So
okay, so let me take on, because he talks about activists, because he's absolutely right. There is an extremely active body of people, and most of them live here in Boise, that are literally pushing this leftist agenda as hard as they can. And what do we do about it? Well, I want to show you, I showed you this before, because those activists are living off of this blue section. They literally are. That's why they have all the time in the world. That's why they can outmaneuver us and outdo us by 10 times, because we're all going to work. We're taking care of our families. We're trying to do what is right, and that's what we're doing. And they're sitting there living literally off the government and have all the time. They have all their needs taken care of, and so that right there has to be at least minimized down to those who actually absolutely need it, or completely eliminated and pushed, which I believe, and pushed back to the churches, back to the families, right? And anybody wants to challenge me on that, go look at the Boise Rescue Mission. They refuse to take state or any government funding, and they are the best rescue mission, the best homeless center that you'll ever find in the world, right here in Boise. And so there's no waste going on there. They actually help people, and they don't take government money. And so, did you know that the Department of Health and Welfare was only created in 1972? That's only 50 years ago. Well, what did we do before then? The churches and the families took care of each other. And now we're creating a whole huge, where 40% of our budget goes to welfare. We're creating all these people that are dependent on it, and we're funding our own destruction. Right? So that's just one aspect of it when it comes to the activism part. The government part, well, vote for me. I'm going to clean out the waste and the bureaucracies. I'm going to change the heads of the agency of this and the department of this, and change the entire culture of our bureaucracies, and that's where the waste and abuse and usurpations are coming from. So I know I didn't completely be able to answer all your questions, but hopefully I gave it a good shot right here. And then I still remember you back here. Yep. Go ahead.
In addition to the activism that we're seeing that we know is well funded, I think one of the bigger challenges we face is that we have a significant amount of apathy within the Republican or conservative voters here. And what that's led to is that we forget that all elected officials from the governor on down swore the same oath to defend the constitutions of the United States and of Idaho. And yet we have a lot of people here in the state that are more ignorantly allegiant to the Republican Party as opposed to conservative principles. And what you're doing is finally getting out that message, but we have 30 days left to get people to realize that.
Right.
And that is seemingly an insurmountable challenge right now. So for the next 30 days, what's a game plan that the rest of us can be doing aside from talking to those 10 people?
Yeah. So you do need to go talk. You need to have those conversations. You need to put the Bundy for Governor yard sign in your front yard. That immediately does something. I promise you. You put it in your front yard, all of a sudden you're going to have a conversation. You walk around with a Bundy shirt on, or bumper sticker. All of a sudden you're having those conversations. That needs to happen, because convincing people. And again, you know, I hate to sit here and say I need your money, but I need your money, because I have very powerful material. In fact, after I answer your question here, because I don't want to go too long, I'll show you a couple of them. And then you could be there. Some of them are in the work, so you're going to get a sneak peek of them. This is what we're going to continue to just keep blasting these, and hopefully we're not doing it to the echo chamber. We're paying to have them in front of the people that have been apathetic, and we're hoping to charge them up. And that's our job. So, but I gotta have money, because the more money I get, the more clicks I can get, the more views I can pay for, and the more people we reach in Idaho. And it's just at that point. It really is just at that point. Okay, right back here.
So that was my question, because I know there's been places you tried to speak, but it's gotten shut down. I don't know why. My question was, how do we help you get the word, get the message out? So you've been touching on that.
So actually, there's one more piece too to this, because I'm asking people to subscribe to my website, the emails, because I'm going to send you these videos and this information so that you can send them out. You can share them and spread them. That's another way we get around this. So 3 things: put a yard sign, a bumper sticker, and all that in your front yard, and battle for me out there. Send them to votebundy.com. There's tons of information. Subscribe to votebundy.com, because then I can send you information. You can spread it all over. And then I need your money, because then we can pay to spread it. And that's what we're asking people to do at this point. Yard signs, bumper stickers, emails, subscribe, and give me as much money as you possibly can. That sounds really, really good.
In a quick conversation, talking to a conservative neighbor, the neighbor says, "You're going to see Bundy. Why? What's the quick thing we can tell people, you versus anyone else, you for Idaho?" The very quick conversation piece.
So, I mean, one thing that pretty much everybody knows is, that I'm willing to stand for you. Like, I'm willing to put myself at risk for your liberties, for your families, for your children. So, the other thing is people don't want to see Idaho slide down this leftist path. And we're going there for sure. It's going to take some, pretty extreme measures to stop this. And I'm going to do all I can to stop this.
So is it Save Idaho?
Keep Idaho, Idaho. That's what our logo is. Keep Idaho, Idaho. Yeah, keep it. Right here.
So why do you think Little won that primary? I was shocked. I after he rescinded the lieutenant governor's executive order that I frankly put in my daughter's backpack that day, when he rescinded it, I remembered.
Yeah.
Why do you think, after what he did, he won the primary? And
So,
do you feel confident going up against his money? Because that's what it was.
well, it was, but so let's break that down. Why did he win the Republican primary? So remember, it's just the Republicans. There's 588,000 Republicans, registered Republicans in Idaho. So it's just those, but they have been dominating. And what happens is anybody who's conservative, anybody who wants to keep Idaho, all registers as Republican. And they get in there and they all split each other's votes, and the establishment has so much money, and they literally control and manipulate the Republican Party, which they're losing that control now. And so they eliminate all the conservative options in the primary. Well, we saw it clear back in August of 2021, the manipulation and the controlling, because I was registered as a Republican, if you remember. And then right before the deadline, I'm like, I'm jumping out. I'm going to jump out, because I'm going to face Little head on in the general elections and give the people a choice. And yeah, so that's why I did it. But we learned something. Okay, I got you, and then I got you. Okay, so you don't have to hold your hand up. But we learned something, because the best poll we got was the Republican primary, and we learned that 47% of the Republicans in Idaho voted against Brad Little. And then he got 52, but if you take the 36,000 or so Democrats that moved over to vote for him, which they absolutely did, you take them out, it's about 50-50, right? Well, if we can get a huge percent of that, or a good percent of that, we don't need all 50, but if we can get a good percent of that, which we know we will, we've been all over Idaho, where Republicans are coming my way, even though I'm an unaffiliated candidate, then we'll also get a good amount of the unaffiliated voters, because that's where your libertarians hang out, and that's kind of my people too. And then we're going to get a huge support from the move-ins, from the California, Washington, and Oregon move-ins. We already are feeling that. And so with those demographics, along with others, we truly have a shot here. We really do have a shot here. And so hopefully that answers your question. Right here and then right here.
So adding on to what Alan just said, if you go back further to December, a really good survey called the Zodiac Survey. He asked one important question: do you think Idaho's on the right track?
Can't hear you.
67% of the people said yes. 67% of the people supported Brad Little at that time. But then from December to May, he lost about 15 points, going to Janice and to Ed primarily.
Yeah.
And at that time, before I went back up, he was
So-
ahead of Ed and Janice.
So he's talking about some polls of how Brad Little really pulled well back. What was it? Beginning of the year, at December, the end of last year, and then how those polls are not so favorable to him anymore. He still polls well, but they've dramatically changed in just this last period of time. Okay, right here, and then right here.
Okay, so when Brad Little gets voted out of office, who is going to be keeping him accountable? Like, who's going to be keeping him accountable, and how are we going to keep him accountable?
So, I mean, so she said when he gets voted out, who's going to hold him accountable? So I'm going to have to assume that you're talking about he holds a lot of power even when he's out of office, which he has, right? He's one of the largest landowners in Idaho. He's has hundreds of millions of dollars to his own name. His grandfather was an amazing land baron, and came in here and had hundreds of thousands of sheep and made millions and millions of dollars and set them up pretty good. But the best thing that the people can do and the way to hold him most accountable is to get him out of office. And so besides that, I don't really know. I mean, keep an eye on him, watch him, make sure he doesn't try to sneak back in. But the best thing we could do is get him out of office and strip him of those powers, and then try to go in and clean up a lot of his mess. There's when the bathtub is overflowing with water, what's the first thing you do? Well, some people say pull the plug. Other people say get towels. But the right thing to do is to turn the water off, right? And so that's the first thing we need to do. We need to turn the water off. Then we pull the plug, and then we clean up the mess with the towels while the water's draining. So yeah. So right back here. The integrity of the vote count? No, I can't speak to it. No, this is what. So there's a lot of people that are concerned about election integrity, rightfully so. And I don't really have probably the best answer, other than we are inside our campaign software. We're building a reporting system where people can report anywhere they see anything or they're concerned about anything. They can report it immediately. I'll have attorneys on staff all through the election process, computer forensic analysis. And the reason why is so that we can immediately challenge them. Immediately, not 2 days, not 2 weeks, not 2 months, immediately challenge them. And then also we're going through a great effort to get voting people, poll watchers. And they have to be registered with the campaign and with the county. So that's quite an effort, because there's over 900 polling places in Idaho. And so if you subscribe to votebunny.com, here in probably about a week, you're going to get an email that says, hey, please be a poll watcher. And there'll be a process in which we've organized through the software for you to be that poll watcher. And we do need your help. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to be really proactive. So right here and then right here. And then I think I missed you, so I'll get you. So go ahead.
What's your opinion on the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry?
That would be IACI. So IACI is the most powerful lobbyist group in Idaho, and they control pretty much the Idaho government. Brad Little served on the board of commission or board of directors for a period of time, and it's completely, you can't tell where the Idaho government begins and the IACI ends, and it's a huge source of corruption and power in Idaho, and somehow we've got to diminish that power. I don't know exactly how, but I think getting in office is one of the best ways to do that. So thank you. Right here, and then go ahead. You've been holding your hand up, and then I'll go over here. Where did the 18 billion? We really don't know. The controller did a really good job showing us where the 1.25 billion went, the very first part of it, and then after that, we really don't know, which is the very reason why it's not supposed to be spent out of the office of the governor. So right here. Then I need to wrap up before I lose everybody. Go ahead.
If we could go just touch back a little bit on the health and welfare. I know we talked about church and families. So for myself, I'm 29 years old. I work close with health and welfare, and it's a nightmare. I have to work 2 jobs, almost full time at both of them, just to be able to live.
Right.
And I kind of want to know, what is the plan with health and welfare? Because that's just, I know I'm not the only one that has to bust their butt to be able to afford things. And I feel like a lot of people my age need to have a future, really, because we can't afford anything. I can't afford a home. And just what's your plan for that? How to correct that so that we're not dying every day?
Thank you. I mean, that is a huge concern. I have a daughter who is married, and they're expecting, and sometime soon they're going to want to have a house, and they're looking at the reality of never being able to own a home in Idaho. And that's just one aspect of the living costs. All of us are feeling that, and I don't believe that there's any reason why we should really feel that way in Idaho. And so I'm going to kind of tie that into the 8 planks of the Keep Idaho plan, and then wrap up with that, because I think I can somewhat answer your question with these. So this is the 8 planks of the Keep Idaho plan. 1, protect private property. I could go into a lot of detail to that, but the Communist Manifesto, the first piece of the Communist Manifesto says the abolition of private property. We must protect our properties. You can't have freedom, can't have liberty without private property. 2, eliminate progressive taxes, including property tax. And people say, well, what are you going to do if you eliminate property tax? How are you going to pay for legitimate purposes of government? And that is, I'm proposing to replace it with a consumption tax. And if you go to votemoney.com, thank you, you'll be able to see the details of that, of how it more than compensates for the needs of government, compensates for our current property tax system, and it's very important that we again protect that private property. Number 3, free Idaho from federal control. So this is where it kind of comes into again a little bit. Why is housing so unaffordable in Idaho? Well, 61% of the land in Idaho is being controlled by the federal government. Here's a map here. The red is federally controlled land in Idaho, and the white is private. And we're landlocked. And, all this area, the white area, is agriculture or city, and we're not able to build and expand out. And so our housing is so expensive because our land is so expensive. And then on top of that, we're building on our agricultural land, destroying our number 1 industry. And so we have, that's a huge problem. Then, all this forest in here that was just heavy forests. we're not able to harvest that because the federal government mostly won't let us do it. And so, you know, a piece of lumber that has to come out of Canada costs 3 times, and we wonder why our housing is so unaffordable. And we can't mine. We can't, you know, use the, did you know that I live in Emmett? That's some of the best silica sand to make glass. But we can't use most of it because the federal government is keep restricting us and limiting it. Just not to go too far into it, but look at this map. This is the federally controlled land. Western United States is 51% federally controlled. The East is 2.4%. Excuse me. This was constitutionally established, and the Western states weren't, and they're kind of just holding that. You might say, well, they're doing it because they want to preserve the land. That's not true, and I'm going to show you that real quick. This is the U.S. Fire history map, right? Does this look familiar? Amazing that amazing that, you know, the very same area that the federal government's controlling is also burning up. Here's a recent, actually, current U.S. fires map. Look at Idaho. It's burning up, literally burning up. This is the restricted use lands in the United States. Look familiar? This is the gold mines and mercury mines in the United States. There's our wealth. There's what we live off of, but the federal government's controlling it and restricting it. Here's the uranium concentrations. Look familiar? Again, tremendous amount of wealth. This is the energy, U.S. map of energy generated from the earth. Look familiar? We, in Idaho, we are resource rich. In the Western United States, we're resource rich. There's no reason why we should be an economic powerhouse, which was one of my points. There's no reason why our cost of living should be what it is. We should have plenty and more to spare. But the federal government is controlling our lands and resources. And federal government. So, great question. How do you solve this problem? And the answer is actually quite simple. My family's been in this business for like 3 decades, or three generations. So, and it's really it comes down to the simple answer is the state has the power to appropriate these lands, and they need to exercise that power. So that's what it comes down to. And it shouldn't be a little ranching family in the middle of the desert trying to fight the federal government, the most powerful government ever known to man, with all the resources and this massive, legal team and all of that, fighting against a little rancher in the middle of the desert that barely can pay his own bills. It should be the state of Idaho doing it, or the state of Nevada doing it. And that's what we need to get. The state of Idaho needs to fight this battle. They need to go arm in arm with the other states if we can get them to come along. So that will truly help everybody. Our standard of living. I mean, the amount of wealth that's in the Western United States has been estimated at $117 trillion just in subsurface minerals. And it's being held away from us because of federal control and extreme globalist environmental agenda. So, okay, let me go back to the because I want to finish up here on the 8 planks. I talked about freeing Idaho from federal control. Number 4, make Idaho independent again. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this is where we get our money from. In the last 38 years, Idaho has not been able to pay its own bills. Over a third of our budget comes from the federal government, and it comes with strings attached to it. And we have to cut those strings and stop taking that money. It's not going to be easy, but we must do it. And so we need to make Idaho independent again. We need to bring back the rule of law.
Yeah.
What law really is. And what is law? The law is supposed to protect the person when someone infringes upon their rights. And we need to get back to that, rather than a system that just protects their own and enriches themselves off of some thing they call a legal system. 6, make Idaho an economic powerhouse. I've talked about that. There's no reason why we can't. We're resource rich in Idaho. There's no reason why we shouldn't be an economic powerhouse. absolutely economic power. There's probably no area with a concentrated land and resources as we have that has more in anywhere in the world than Idaho. I don't know if I said that right, but I think you got the point. 7, secure the quality of life for every Idaho family. I mean, let's secure that. That's the purpose of government. And 8, make Idaho an example of peace and prosperity to the rest of the world. And boy, do we need it. So I've had you here for a long time. I've explained what we need to do and how I need your help. And I just appreciate your time and your questions and all your comments. And hopefully that you've seen things here today that'll motivate you to act. Because if we don't act, then we become acted upon. It's one or the other. So thank you for your time.